Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I am your host Faisal Raza and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, Pakistan is soon entering into another International Monetary Fund program which is expected to have board approval soon. In that case, Pakistan would get another extended fund facility of 7 billion US dollar for the next 3 years or for 37 months. Federal Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb categorically said that without structural reforms and enhancing tax to GDP ratio from 9% to 13%, getting financial autonomy would be a distant dream. And for that matter, the strict economic reforms are inevitable. In current financial year 24-25, lots of measures taken by the present government to enhance tax base and generate revenue. And it's another fact that during the past 6 months, rupee got stabilized, forex reserves are slightly better, large-scale manufacturing performing well, exports and remittances are actually growing, trade deficit squeezing, current account deficit lowest in 13 years, stock exchange crossed 80,000 mark. If this all sustain with inflation and policy rate further goes down, then economy has a chance to rise again. But this whole situation is only from the last 6 months at least. Means economy and its growth is still fragile. And we have to work hard to strengthen economy. To discuss this very important situation, we have in our studios Dr. Noor Fatima. She is the political economist. Most welcome to you, Dr. Syed. Thank you very much for your presence. We have with us Advocate Syed Tanseer Bukhari. He is the former President Tax Bar Association Rawalpindi Islamabad and practicing lawyer particularly regarding the revenue cases and taxation cases. Most welcome to you, Shahzab. Thank you very much for your presence. And online joining us from abroad, Dr. Usman Chohan. He is the senior economist. Most welcome to you, Dr. Thank you very much for your presence online. My first question to you, Dr. Dr. Usman, that after the staff level agreement, Pakistan is expected to enter into another International Monetary Fund extended fund facility, and it took country at least a time to avoid acute debt and financial or fiscal crisis. But how much it's true that in long run this debt burden must have to be managed in a due course, that it must have to be in a rational form, how to increase growth particularly and then create employment and reduce poverty, because these are the benchmarks and Pakistan needs to attain.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure. When you speak of the IMF's extended fund facility, you are considering Pakistan's reforms and its austerity paradigm. So Pakistan right now is in an austerity paradigm where it is trying to curb inflation, it's trying to restructure important entities, and it's trying to put itself onto a future growth path. But you cannot stay in this austerity paradigm and then also expect growth, because austerity is the opposite of growth. So inshallah, once this austerity phase is over and the fundamentals have been set correct in the federal structure, provincial structures, as well as private-public partnerships, the private sector's role, credit, and so on, when all of these fundamentals are set correct, then you will have the opportunity to develop a growth strategy that is long-term and meaningful. So that should be seen as a second phase once austerity paradigm is set to its fruition and completion.
Definitely, your point well taken. Dr. Noor Fatima, how do you see the surge in inflation? Because this is the prime question of the common man right now. Is this because of the heavy taxation, the cost of energy, because of doing business, domestic price mechanism? As the Asian Development Bank recent outlook says, that overall inflation remains 15%, that is 3% more than that of the government target of 12%. While the Fitch Pakistan Country Risk Report estimates that it could ease at least to 6.5%, but till December this year. So the average SPI based inflation rose to at least 24.3%. So how do you see this high inflation right now, and For the people, it's really difficult to go on with it.
Yes, even ahead of this program, there is a surge in the prices. We saw this coming down inflation trend in the last 2 months, but now in present month and in month to come further, there seems to be higher inflation. Inflationary pressure is now going because of also the energy prices, which is of course has been reset or re-examined by the government, which is basically to fulfill the requirement of the IMF program ahead of the time. But the issue is that program, of course, it has been agreed to the staff level, but it will definitely, they will monitor till the time we fulfill all those conditions which they want us to do as a prerequisite. So we are of course on that, but the point is that it will increase the cost of doing business, which is the most important at this time point, because energy prices directly hit your business.
Obviously.
It will directly hit your, of course, inflation. Fuel cost, of course, add on your inflation. The point is that you won't stay competitive. You are not competitive, you are actually adding more deficit into your current account as well as your, of course, trade. Yeah. So it is a matter of concern at this point of time, but the masses as well, because they were not expecting that inflation will go high so soon after we have seen the trend when it was downwards.
Yeah,
so that is the point.
Definitely, it was a ray of hope, at least for the people,
hope,
but unfortunately, right now it's surging again. Bukhari Sahib, Finance Minister pledges to increase the tax to GDP ratio from 9% to 13%. The big question is how, because there are certain measures taken in the recent budget. Whether the government would focus to bring the big guns into the tax net, because we have seen a little, though the effort was there, but very little in the budget. Like retailers, now retailers are going to have something regarding the fixed monthly tax going to be introduced by FBR soon. Then the traders, gold sector, agriculture is still in debate, real estate and others. So 5 million tax dodgers are also in focus right now. Then you have Tajir Do scheme that will at least that brought because to enhance the tax base and how it could be. And what about some of the retailers in 100 to 20,000 benchmark for at least 42 cities. So there are certain measures by the government, but it looks how it would be done.
Thank you very much, Faisal, having me with you on this economy. Tax. Measures. Unfortunately, the age of Pakistan is now 77 years. It's a too mature age. If we are thinking about what has been done with this country in last decades, I say with very, very broken heart, nothing has been done. Every time we heard about the measures. At the moment, we not hearing the word, the economy is on ventilator. If you recall your memory, we are hearing since last 5 years, economy is on ventilator. In real, still to date, economy is on ventilator. Only the ventilating machine has been changed, the new machine installed. Now the patient is breathe easily. Why I am saying this is the IMF cannula injected to the patient vein, and now he is feeling now well, and their caretakers are happy about it. Now the economy is growing.
It's a kind of all kind of medications or all something
of course,
like that which is going on.
At the moment, I say appreciation for the Prime Minister who started his day at early in morning as per his historical record. We see the meeting start at 7:30 early in the morning. At right now, Prime Minister dream was that
he utilizes the sun actually to save energy.
Yes, of course.
So
Prime Minister introduced first of all the Tajir Do scheme before 4 months at I think so 13th March 2024.
Yes.
Many people were talking about it. I really say it's the need of time. It's the need of time. Our 95% revenue leakage from retail sector. It is a crystal and clear written on the wall. And we are facing losses. Manufacturers are paying tax at the gunpoint. Importers are paying taxes at gunpoint at the time of import. Okay, the question of under invoicing and here the leakage of revenue is another question. But the main thing, your retail sector is not under the tax net. As you know, the government has fixed the target 13 trillion rupee for the current financial year. So this is the 40% approximate.
So do you agree with this fixed monthly taxation for the retail sector, shopkeepers and all others?
Faisal, up to some extent I agree with it.
Okay.
It may be difficult to implement it. The reason is this: we are sitting in Islamabad. One shop is earning 100,000 per day. The neighbor is not earning 100,000 per day, but the yardstick for the theme and
it should be like
legislation.
It should be on profit, I think, so that
of course, the true spirit is the profit.
Too harsh if you just fix the tax on all.
The government come onto the knees at
Yeah,
the
definitely.
moment.
Yeah, that is another.
No way.
That is another thing.
So they try to this scheme on another way. Okay, we if implement without corruption, without any mafias, if we implement from 100 rupee to 30,000 rupees, nothing for running businesses. And keep it in mind, this is an advance tax. That is not the final tax liability,
definitely.
which is the good step taken by the government. Otherwise, another Pandora will open. The billionaire will pay the 3,60,000 in a year and he will go out. So they make it minimum tax. If they implement this scheme in true letter and spirit, then you can say the GDP will go from 9% to 13%.
Okay.
Here is a hope.
Okay.
So we are expecting the Prime Minister is doing with clean heart.
So what about right now the debate which is going on regarding the agriculture sector, which is the 24% contributor to the GDP, country's GDP, amounting 22 trillion rupees. That is the whole crux of the money which is
Business
involved
of
there.
the agriculture.
So, it is least contributor to the taxation, 0.01%.
Easy to
That
say
is-
zero.
That is definitely, that is less than 4 billion rupees. So in tax revenue, so do you think that agri income tax or on more than 12 acres can generate at least 0.7 million returns so as the revenue?
100% I support it. Since last my practice 3 decades, I am saying, at the passage of time, we face the price hike in wheat, sugar, other pulses and other agriculture items. Have we get the price subsidy in these products? No. The one bag of the wheat goes started from 500 now to 4,000 rupee. So why not imposition of tax on it? Bring the agriculture in the tax net, and all the people will pay tax. You will see. Okay, one negative thing.
If you just minus the middleman from there, because that middleman
farmer
is actually earning, not your real farmer. So if you are getting tax from the farmer, it means that he is directly paying you the tax. So the profit must have to go directly to him or her. So the middleman must have to be minus in that, because ultimately that will
one confusion. Middleman called Aarti.
Yes.
Aarti is the richest person in all these
Richest
transactions.
person, yes.
Okay. The income tax ordinance.
He is the
already
agriculture
taxing.
retailer.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Yes.
He is the bridge between the grower and the market. At this moment, we need to tax the big land owners.
Yes.
They are holding thousands of acres.
What we call the big guns of the sacred cow.
Of course, as previous in government, we see that our former chairman FBR said, when I was trying to tax the agriculture, the 42 MNA of Southern Punjab come to us and say, we will show no confidence if you are coming on this tax. This is unfortunate. We are Pakistan. We
Yes,
are family.
everyone should have to step forward for Pakistan.
Contribute to Pakistan.
Yes,
we are
yes,
still
yes.
on a ventilator. Only change of new machine is nothing more than it. We can say that we are now growing and we are strengthen up ourselves.
Definitely.
Nothing.
Your point well taken. Dr. Noor, what would be the impact and challenges on production and ultimately the exports, when business cost is on rise due to the swelling electricity and gas prices, cost of raw material, the crude oil as well, or the refined oil products, transportation, imports, high interest rates, and new taxes on export income as well. So actually PM just yesterday chaired a meeting of National Export Development Board, and he was very ambitious on at least hitting the $6 billion mark regarding the exports. So IT has grown, no doubt. So PM is very ambitious on that. So how we are going to attain when the production and the export is getting jolts?
In my view, I think if there is no out of the box solution for this, in the present circumstances, I think the production will be reduced in the manufacturing sector, and it will affect our exports. And there will be layoffs, because when you don't produce, you cannot pay, you don't need anymore your laborers and your, of course, workers. And ultimately it will lead to another thing, and which I foresee is reduction in your investment. Because then investment basically requires in your structural innovation.
Obviously.
When you do not do that, so ultimately your investment also will be reduced. So we need to, it is a kind of a whole cycle of the things, right? So we need to look at the energy price immediately. It requires to redo and subsidies. Of course, we need to do the target subsidies, but we have to, and of course the fuel prices. These are things not only for a common citizen, but your manufacturing, your industry, your cost of doing business, your investment, which is ultimately our future, which is a sustainable future.
Definitely.
No one is never
right,
a sustainable future.
I think so that government has very squeezed space to have subsidies and all that, because that is ultimately going to be very risky if you are having an IMF program right
That's
now.
why I said it's targeted subsidies.
Definitely, definitely. Dr. Usman, Asian Development Bank suggests Pakistan's GDP growth rate at 2.8%. Fitch estimates 3.2%. IMF projection is 3.5% as compared to the government growth rate target of 3.6%, while 5.4% growth rate is of the regional emerging markets. So whether through existing government efforts, will we be able to attain 3.5% to 3.6% GDP growth rate during the current fiscal year?
Yes, it's a good question, because we certainly can, but there's reasons for achieving a 3.5% GDP target, which is actually that we have a low base year to target. So when we measure GDP, we are looking at it on a year-to-year basis. So the past 2 years, the GDP has been at a very low click, very low rate. So if you have such poor figures for 2 years, then a subsequent year mathematically becomes easy to achieve, so long as you also have other factors. And those factors are whether inflation remains comparatively low, whether energy prices globally stabilize, whether we have the incipient efforts towards the reinvigoration of our industry, and certain other elements. Then achieving 3.5 on an easy base year is in fact possible. But the real question is whether we can look at GDP targets of 3% over 5 years or 6% over 5 years, meaning longer horizons of analysis would be much useful. And for that, we do need to come out of this austerity paradigm with a much firmer footing. That is very important for us, to have a longer horizon of growth rather than just look at the oncoming year of growth.
Definitely, you are absolutely right, because we have to follow at least the strict economic policies, reforms and all that, so that we can achieve, this is not going to be beyond any sort of a target. So Pakistan's debt burden actually is the major chunk which is actually eating the major chunk of the revenue. ADB, or the Asian Development Bank, predicts that it will ease at least to 70% of the GDP during current fiscal year, but estimated interest payments are expected to require a staggering 62% of the fiscal revenue. So up from at least 41% when we compare it to fiscal year 2022-23, while government has rupees 9.8 trillion or 76% of the total tax target of rupees 13 trillion for the interest payments. So how do you see that from where we get the fiscal space to retire our debt, to repay some sort of the interest payments, or to get something out of that for the development expenditure? So this is going to be a very vicious cycle and a very acute kind of formula.
Yes, this is how we normally frame the debate in common discourse, that we have a huge ballooning of our interest payments, and that our total direct and indirect taxation is about as much as the interest we have to pay. So it seems very scary. But in fact, there are two components to our interest payments, or even to our borrowing. One is the foreign borrowing interest payments, and one is the domestic borrowing interest payments. They're kind of lumped together for a general analysis. But the foreign borrowing is at very low rates, and that is for a foreign currency. That's not as scary a thing as our domestic borrowing, which has been huge because it has been at a very high interest rate. Our base rate has been above 20% for a long time now, for 18 months at least. And so we are borrowing from our own banks at a very high rate that we set for institutions that operate in our jurisdiction. And they, because of this, announce record profits. The banks of Pakistan announce record profits every quarter, quarter after quarter. So they're having a very good time, while overall our economy is perhaps not having as good a time. So I think that there has to be very serious conversations about banking reforms on the liability side, because this is the product of our State Bank of Pakistan Amendment Act, where previously the central bank was the provider of liquidity to the government. Now it doesn't do that role anymore. It does it via the banking channel, the private banking channel. So we have to take a very good look at our domestic banking system and why they are enjoying record profits when we are not having a record economy. And there's plenty of things you can do to the banking system, from the very benign, like a liability restructuring, all the way to more serious stuff where you consolidate the balance sheets in a serious manner. But our domestic banking system cannot have so good a time when the overall economy is at a very different trajectory. So I advocate for very strong banking reform, and I don't want to see anybody having record profits until we as a whole, as a society, are doing much, much better.
Your point well taken, Dr. Usman. Dr. Noor, what do you think about the debt to GDP ratio? 70% according to the ADB is still significantly higher than the average 47% government debt to GDP ratio in the developing Asia actually. So most of the experts believe that countries' debt levels will remain elevated over the next 10 years. And while IMF says that Pakistan needs external financing of at least US dollar 21 billion for the next financial year and 23 billion US dollar till 27, and then so on. So how do you see this situation?
That is, I think, perfectly the ideal, I would say, the prediction they made. That is the ideal situation. Of course, we cannot go for that ideal situation as such in this given circumstances, but the point is that normally the survival of a country in economic condition is 50 to 60% of your GDP ratio of your debt, and we are exceeding since long to 80% or to 90% still. So that is actually a need some reforms, particularly
we are actually exceeding unprecedentedly.
Yes. So first of all, let we accept it that we are exceeding. No? Just pushing the things under the carpet and brushing it like that will not work. We need really to work not for the IMF, we need to work for our own sustainable economy or sustainable system in the future also. So first of all, let we agree on it, recognize it that this is not a viable option to go with this debt ratio. Now, having that much, can we acquire all that funding that they have projected? No, we cannot. We cannot. We can try for it, as Dr. Usman also said. We can. We should make efforts. But the point is that if we cannot go in ideal situation even in 10 years, if we are not going to have our basic reforms in our basic fundamental economic reform stabilization.
Definitely, this needs a lot. Really.
Agriculture reform, even our civil service reforms. But we keep on hearing it's for decades.
Definitely.
But how much efficiency we actually producing, that is the question. It is very much linked with your wastage of your resources in this country.
Definitely, we need a lot more things.
A lot more things
we
yeah.
need. So,
Yeah.
Advocate Tanseer sir, how do you see the imposition of the indirect taxes, rather the direct one, like additional levies on electricity, petrol, diesel, taxes on the grocery items, the property? It's directly and indirectly actually affecting the common man. So, increases the burden on already burdened. We taxed the already taxed. So non-filers are enjoying and the filers are actually suffocating, and people who are voluntary taxpayers, they are actually having no relief. Number one. And the second is that what do you see about the SRO 350, I think, so for sales tax registration persons, whether this factor contribute to enhance the revenue or curtail the revenue, because that is very, very important in the benchmark. So what do you say about the education process of FBR field offices, especially the time limitations to adjust these matters?
Faisal, these are three questions. One is related
if you
to
briefly tell us about
yes,
it.
These are three questions. Indirect taxes are not good taxes. The reason affect all the people across the country, 25 crore people affect by this tax.
Especially the salaried class.
Salaried and small business or small earning people. Unfortunate, we are relying upon it. And we are continue relying upon it. If we recall our memory, the sales tax rates in initial 90s decade was 12%. Rise 1%, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, now 18%, 18% yes. Plus a penalty of 4% for unregistered person. Unfortunately, this 22% directly hit the price structure, enhance the inflation and all these things. One thing is clear, indirect tax is in real, you can say in this target, the 78% share, which is not good sign for the economy. We need the direct taxes imposition.
And that is the long-term solution.
Long-term solution. The second question you was asking about the very pertinent, I appreciate your study. Right now, the Pakistan hold the less than 1 lakh sales tax registered persons. Okay. This is also relate to the indirect taxes. There is the VAT system, value added tax regime. Importer pay the tax, manufacturer claim his output as input tax, and distributor, retailer and user pay this taxes. This SRO makes sanction on the buyer that if his supplier will not pay the tax or submit the return, his return is unable to be submitted into the FBR IRS system. Okay. Right now, Pakistan is running under less than 100 big units like OGDCL, DISCOs, all other petroleum sector companies. They are normally file their sales tax return late. So 100,000 of people affected due to this process. So FBR need to look into the matter. Even right now, the Lahore High Court has suspended this SRO for the time being, the person who approached the court.
Okay.
So FBR must see in it, this will curtail the revenue rather than enhance the revenue. The simple answer is this: if I will not submit my return, I will not pay the tax.
Obviously.
So if the tax payment not made, so how you can earn the money, how you can get the target of 13 trillion rupee?
Definitely. But in other words, sometimes the tax is paid, but you are filing these returns a bit late.
Late.
So if that is the case, it doesn't mean you are not a taxpayer.
Yeah.
But that must have to be
That
eased.
must. So
Definitely.
this
You are
SRO is
absolutely
making
right.
problem
So what
for
about
the
the education process?
Adjudication, yes. Yeah, this is also a burning issue at the moment in the tax regime. FBR says something about the litigation, that one forum is appellate tribunal,
Yes.
inland revenue.
Yes.
They said there are 2,700 billion rupees struck in this forum in shape of taxes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's correct up to the figure, okay, but unnecessary filing of appeal from the department side, which is FBR, make this receivable high. So Prime Minister feel it that the major revenue is leaking at these forums. No, it's absolutely wrong. At the moment, we need to readdress our adjudication system, especially from the first stage, which is started from the deputy collector, who is the officer to initiate the proceeding. You will surprise, in our tax system, there is 5 years limitation. If Faisal submitted his return for tax year 18, he can be asked question and queries in June 2024 as per the legislative language. Why? You curtail these limitations from 6 years to 2 years. You give the relief to the public, those are paying taxes. You make 60 days from 30 days for filing of tribunal appeal and filing for high court appeal. And surprisingly, 100 rupee was the fee at the high court level when a litigant join the high court forum.
This is unfortunate.
But
right now the situation is that you want taxpayers to pay the taxes, and you have to enhance the taxpayers. For that, you have to facilitate the taxpayers,
not
and
to
the filers.
penalize.
But that is unfortunately not there. Dr. Usman, how you analyze the Fitch Pakistan country risk report projections that suggest an inflation goes down? If that goes down, key policy rate might also cut down to 16.4% by December 2024 and 14% by December 2025 from 20.5% in June 2024. Just we have the last month. In that, meanwhile, budget deficit would slip a bit to 6.7% of the GDP in current fiscal year. From 7.4% during the last fiscal year, whereas the current account deficit would remain at an average of 1.1%. It is going to be difficult for the government as well to finance that. So how do you see that?
Yes, this country risk report, I think, is quite positive in the sense that it forecasts a decline in inflation over the next 2 years, calendar years. And I think that is a reasonable sign, although inflation is a little bit difficult to predict these days, not just because of local context, but very much because of global geopolitical context. So the reserve rate, or the Reserve Bank's base rate, depends on their calculations of forward-looking inflation. And it has come down considerably over the previous 2 months, but it isn't clear how it'll be over the next 6 months. And that makes it difficult to forecast how the base rate should come down. The IMF itself encourages or is totally in favor of the state bank maintaining a high rate. But in order for us to realize economic growth, we actually need a much more decent, lower base rate to begin to start economic activity. Therefore, I believe that if the Fitch country report is correct, it is quite good because emerging markets generally have higher inflation, but having catastrophic interest rates is in nobody's favor. We do want to see more gradually declining inflation that is stable so that businesses can start to make key decisions. The central bank brings its rate down. So overall, if it does materialize as they forecast, I think it would be a very good thing.
Definitely, it brings a real-time economic stability in the country. So, Dr. Usman, do you think that rupee and foreign exchange reserves stabilization actually both depend on the inflow of dollar? So, if the state bank make the debt servicing likely due to because we have some of the debt payments due in July and or in August, start of August next month. So then reserves actually fall and the currency might depreciate, and it is slightly depreciating right now. Which has, we have seen the last 3-4 months a bit stabilization, no big fall we have seen. So reserves still bit critical, but at the moment that is around overall, if we just imagine that $9.42 billion with the state bank, some $5.27 billion with the commercial banks, it's accumulative. It's $14.7 billion. So how do you see this situation?
That's a very tricky question. Currency flows are difficult to predict, but two things that we can be certain of. One is that Pakistan has always met its sovereign payments on time. Even in the difficult period we faced over the last 2 years, we did meet everything on time, and we also negotiated for certain rollovers or extensions to try to ease that burden. But every obligation that we did have to meet, we met on time. So this is something that is in our favor. The second thing is that there has been a very careful curtailing of the foreign exchange market to prevent speculation. The consequence of that is that it is quite difficult for regular people to procure dollars, or even smaller businesses to procure dollars. For large businesses, it's okay because they have their own reserves, but it's generally very hard. But the trade-off there is that there is a very tight bandwidth within which the Pak rupee US dollar rate is kept. So I actually don't foresee...
Your point well taken. Advocate Tanseer sir, do you not think that to enhance the net taxpayers and filers must be given mandatory relief as social protection services, discounts at every sale and purchase, and other aspects, as the taxpayers' digital record must be maintained at the digital payments, so that taxpayers can get rebate or refunds without lengthy procedures and investigations, inquiries and litigations?
Of course, it's a good question and also a good suggestion as well. The reason is this: we are dreaming since last decades and decades. If the person is registered with the tax system in Pakistan, he must be ready for punishment for each and every day, coming day. The reason is this: our rebate system, refund system is very, very stagnant and not working in a true letter and spirit. Right now, come to the benefits, reliefs and protections, and you can say the taxpayer who pay tax high, he will be hold the right of privileged person. Yes, 2016, if recall, 2013, I recall
he
my
must
memory.
have to be like privileged person, because he is paying to the state, paying back to the state at its own will.
He have a right to be a privileged person. 2013-14, if I recall my memory, this government at that time, Mia Muhammad Nawaz Sharif was the prime minister. They announced top 100 taxpayer, okay, and they give some privilege perks and some benefits to these people, like if you are going to abroad, there will be no queue for these top taxpayers.
It was absolutely an encouraging thing done at that time.
If you are going to police station, if you are going to anywhere, you will be on priority. That was a good step. But unfortunately, this was happen only for 1 or 2 years.
I think so. That must have to be made a precedent, really. Dr. Noor, what is in place to get Pakistan's economy out of a fragile condition, especially when in terms of the external shocks? 40% countrymen work in agriculture. Any climatic catastrophe, lower grain production, or even jump in oil prices because of the lots of situations there could pose a significant threat, as already Pakistan's GDP per capita is actually shrinking. That was 78% in 2009, and there are lots of reports could drop to 51% in coming years, particularly by 2032. So how do you see?
What I feel is, at the moment, it's not only the agriculture sector.
Yes, it is just an example, because it's across the board in every sector.
Yes, it is in industry, it is in your infrastructure, it is. Government has to prioritize certain things, in my view. First, it will be only government, it is only state who actually invest in infrastructure, not the state, not the investor coming from outside.
Obviously.
So they need to make investment in infrastructure to attract foreign investment and local investment also. Second, what I think is financial inclusion is very important.
Yes, definitely.
Banking services, access to the people, credit access to the people, and digitization. This divide in digitization in Pakistan, it is around the world, but in Pakistan is much larger.
Yes.
So, how to bridge that? And second, the role of entrepreneurship is the key.
Definitely.
Is the key.
You are absolutely right. Advocate Tanseer sir, State Bank's amendments in electronic money institutions bearing actually fruits. This is a very positive sign. Bank's recent quarterly report shows that banking, as Dr. Noor was also mentioning, mobile banking processed at least 301.5 million transactions worth rupees 12.96 trillion between January to March this year. So it shows 67.8% growth and 91% volume increases. So while if we just get the example of electronic system, so that is internet banking grows 56.2%, point of sale 39%, that is still stuck somewhere by FBR. So e-commerce 48.4%, digital wallets 148%, and RAS banking system, that is 241%. So what about the spreading this digital payment trend that help actually document, not only to document economy, but also track the transactions, identity of and identifying of the businesses, potential taxpayers, and build revenue cycle in a very smooth way, without any hurdle.
Absolutely, 100% right. If we go to this digitalization, it's a good sign to increase in the volume of transactions. Even now, a labor is also using these small apps to transferring 1,000 rupee, 2,000 rupee, 5,000 rupee.
Yes.
Even billionaires are also using these apps to transferring the funds to other people. Right now, the thing is this: since 2016, State Bank and the collecting agency of Pakistan were fighting to each other. The collecting agency was asking to share the data of bank with tax authorities. State Bank was saying no need to right now, because this will curtail the economic activities in the country. The people will be
shy away,
and they will go so far from this system. Okay, it's all right, but fortunate to say, right now FBR and State Bank on the same page. In the scenario right now, that this digitalization will be the best tool for our Federal Board of Revenue, who is the collecting federal agency, to bring the people in the tax net. You know, the expense then happen if you earn something.
Yes, definitely.
If you are earning, then you are spending.
Yeah, obviously.
So check the spending of the people and tax accordingly without making the inflated amounts which are going into the litigation. Curtail the litigation, make the agreed assessment of the citizen without pinching them, without blackmailing them.
Obviously.
This is the...
Definitely. Dr. Noor, do you think the economic benchmarks like rupee stabilization, considerable foreign reserves, iron steel import surged, because when you have some sort of economic build-up, it means that some solid imports are there. So that is surged at least 46.5%. Large-scale manufacturing showing absolute great signs. 6th consecutive month, we have seen more surge in that, 7.33%. Exports growth is 11.5%, 6% decline in trade deficit. So 11% increase in remittances. Current account deficit is only 681 million US dollars, means lowest in 13 years. So if sustained, if inflation and policy rate goes down, do you think that we have a chance to rise our economy?
There is always a chance. One should be optimistic. Of course, we are optimistic. That is not the point that we should not be pessimistic. But the point is, only being optimistic won't work.
Yeah, definitely.
The point is that these all figures and the whatever you quoted, this is quite encouraging. But this shows economic service reports of the previous financial year.
Yes,
so far, what we have seen. The point is, the present surge will let this maintain all these figures which we have now in front of us for next 6 months. That is the challenge. Which
Definitely, you are absolutely right, because we need strict financial discipline, along with that very important robust reforms, economic reforms. Dr. Usman, how do you see IMF's suggestion to have national fiscal pact among the federal and provincial governments to have more provincial tax collection and revenue generation, more spending on education, health, social protection, regional public infrastructure investments, and improve the public service?
Thank you for this important question. I think this is the single most important reform that, if we implement, could change the fiscal architecture and its sustainability. The way that our center and our provinces are currently dealing with the budget, it is not sustainable, it is terrible. And in fact, if you have the federation as a revenue raising but provinces as spending units, you have a great mismatch. So the National Fiscal Pact would put more onus on the provinces to raise their own revenues and therefore spend them according to the local needs. I think this would be the most wonderful thing we could have to remedy the distortions created by the 18th Amendment. So I'm strongly in favor of this measure.
So, Dr. Usman, why not to focus on multifaceted and dynamic national reforms, resolve existing economic challenges through innovation, investing in research and development, attract foreign investment by mainstreaming countries' talent, give tech and financial support to the potential human resource, reform state sectors like state-owned enterprises privatization, curtailing government expenditures, pension reforms, strengthen economics governance, create conducive environment for the private sector?
I fully agree with this suggestion. I think that is a very good blueprint. What it requires is political will. What it requires is removing vested interests out of the way, and also really prioritizing these things in partnership with other stakeholders in society. It's not just for government to do these sorts of things, it is all of society together. But what you have just given as a summary blueprint is wonderful, and I fully endorse it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Usman, for your time online. I'm really happy that you have elaborated, described things very well. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, Dr. Noor. Fatima, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, Advocate Tanseer Sahab, for your time here in the studios. Viewers, as you have just listened to our panelists, but they categorically said that right now the reforms which are going on and the tight fiscal discipline, that is very important for Pakistan to grow its economy, to attain the sustainability. 95% of the revenue actually is at loss in the retail sector and lots of other sectors like agriculture, gold and all others. So we have to harness that one as well. Tajir Do scheme is actually a breather. So that must have to be go on with the ease for those people who are actually the traders and the retailers and all others. We have to give target subsidies to the industry if we have to have more production and robust exports to earn more foreign exchange, to lower the trade deficit, less imports, more exports. Then of course we have to have the tight fiscal and economic policy reforms that must have to be important regarding the, if we want to attain 3.6% of the growth rate of the GDP, then it is very important that we have to carve some sort of a strategy and reforms at the debt servicing level, because foreign debt is not much going to be harmful for Pakistan. As our panelists suggested, the domestic debt is actually eating, so we require the domestic debt to be at a certain level, and along with that the robust banking reforms are also needed for that one. So we need direct taxes, not the indirect taxes. It is important to sustain the economy. Adjudication process of the FBR must have to be eased for the taxpayers and the filers, because it takes a lot of time, lot of hiccups, hurdles there. We have to be optimistic for the economy, for the economic stability, as our panelists also suggested that we need strict financial discipline and economic reforms. That is must to go on with the economy. So we have to be very hopeful for the economic stability in the country, but that also need the political stability. So this is all from today's Foresight. It's time to sign off. Allah Hafiz.